the track has led me here.
Hi America Film My Phone and welcome to another video. Today we are ranking all of the albums by Fiona Apple and I am very excited to get into this. Last month I did all the albums ranked from Alanis Morissette and that was really special and that was really cool to really not necessarily wrap up all the content I'm ever going to listen to from Alanis Morissette, including like all her singles and all that stuff that like she's released outside of projects. And obviously she'll probably continue making music. But it was a nice way to really like take the just over a year that I had really reacted and talked about all her works to really like, sit with it and reflect on that. And this is actually October is right around a year it's been since I started talking about Fiona Apple on my channel. And I think it's right time, I think, for me to really talk about like all of Fiona Apple's projects. We have few of them. We only have 5 to talk about, which is great because then we can spend more time really talking about how like lovely all of her albums are and just ranking them and really just thinking about them in a way that's like a little more distant from, taking that first reaction. Disclaimer that all of these like thoughts are my opinion. Like I've heard all of these albums for the first time within roughly the past year. I know I heard Fetch like right around the time it came out, but I really was not paying attention to it at all. So I wouldn't really count that. But for me, yeah, these 5 albums really have gotten at most really a year of like thinking about them like critically. And yeah, so I'm going to have a different experience than if you were around when Tidal came out. I was not alive at that time. So I'm not going to have that same experience of like, oh my god, she dropped this and she dropped that. And I really haven't seen any music videos at all, so I really don't know like the eras necessarily. But I go with the music and the music is telling me to put these albums in certain places for now. Another disclaimer is that this might change. I would say the only one that's really set in stone is my number 1. I think the other ones can change. I think the second and third are closer than I think like 4th and 5th. I don't know. First is very much first right now, and the rest kind of like fall into a place. And so remember that she only has 5 albums, so like being last is still like the 5th best Fiona Apple project. And that's what was hard is that, if I had it go down a spot, like it didn't go from like 3rd to 4th, it went from better half of the list to worst half of the list. And that's kind of hard to really like sit with and digest. And so like, I hope that your favorite album isn't in the bottom. It might be, but like, I hope to show that I do like care about Fiona Apple's music. Like I think she's never released a bad album. I like all of her albums. Some of them I love more than others, but that doesn't mean that she made bad music at that time. That doesn't mean there should be any disrespect for those projects. It's just, a matter of taste. And third disclaimer is that we're going to be talking about topics that Fiona Apple talks about on her projects. So if you're familiar, she talks about stuff about assault, like her own experiences with misogyny and, her own experiences, being assaulted and her experiences, being in abusive and toxic relationships. And I think sometimes substance use as well. So if any of those topics and any other topics about Fiona Apple, like concern you or you need to take a step away or just not watch this video, I totally understand. And yeah, come back next time. You can also hear more extended thoughts on each album in my first reaction or in Fetch the Bolt Cutter's case in my re-listen. And so you can always check those out if you want some more like thoughts, especially at that first listen. Anyway, let's get into it. So at number 5 in our last place, but I would rather just say 5th, honestly, our 5th best Fiona Apple album, in my opinion, is Tidal. I know that already is the hot take. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people, because like I was actually watching like another Fiona Apple ranked worst to best, I think it was RTV's. And like everyone in the comments below, he didn't put Tidal last, but everyone in the comments below, I read every single one I could find for like a few minutes, and none of them had Tidal as last. Like, not a single one. And so, like, for me, it was hard to place it here, but I think it was clear, I think, in my reaction of the album, but I think it makes sense now, is that this album, you know, it is her debut, and it sounds a lot different than a lot of the other albums that she's made. And I think for me, has a lot of slowness. And I think that's how I describe it, because there's 10 songs on it, but it's over 50 minutes long. So the average runtime is 5 minutes per song, and that's a lot. That's a lot, especially for a lot of ballads and stuff like that, and songs that don't necessarily feel like they evolve over time. And that's okay, I guess. Like, I understand it. I understand why that can be a mood. And for me, it's a mood. It's more a background listen, though, than an album I want to actively pull songs from and like really jam to. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of songs on here that I really do vibe with, like Sleep to Dream, Criminal, The First Taste. Like, those type of songs, Shadowboxer, Carry On. Like, I know that is half the album. I get that. But I think for me, it's more of a, while I like these songs as individual songs, the rest of the album I'm not going to be vibing to as much. I think it's just like, oh, if it's not like one of those particular songs that has a little more rhythm to it, I just tune out. I get a little bored. And I know that there's a lovely amount of like songwriting on there. It's a very well written project. But for me, I think it's just that feeling of, just because you have great songwriting doesn't mean you're going to necessarily capture me. And I think, especially with how the sonic arrangements happen, it's sometimes difficult to understand what she's saying. Some of the metaphors are not as clear. I think she gets a lot more direct and precise in a lot of her later works. And that's like okay, I think, to accept that Tidal is going to be the bottom for me. And I think I can also justify that with being like, she was like at most like 18 when she released this project. I think she was like 16, honestly. So like, I think, you know, thinking that Tidal is going to be the best of Fiona Apple albums when she's had like decades really to grow from like being like a teenager, I think is like, should be expected, honestly. Like, I feel like a lot of debut albums are not going to be the best album of someone's career. And if it is, like, that must be tiring, honestly, for those musicians who do seem like their first album is going to be their best album. I feel like that just would be exhausting for like Fiona Apple to deal with, like being like, I can't really like live up to the success of this first project. And I think Fiona Apple has outdone herself 4 times. So like, I think that's like a good thing. And I think it's just really, for me, that it's very chill, it's very slow. There's very little percussion on those songs that I didn't mention earlier, the ones that are on the slower side. And for me, percussion really is important to me. And like, I think just like sonically it's not as compelling as some of the other projects that she's made. Favorite songs on it, however, are the ones I listed. So if you want to check out those songs in particular, if you don't know Fiona Apple, check those out. At number 4, we have The Idler Wheel is Wiser Than the Driver of the Screw, and Whipping Cords Will Serve You More Than Ropes Will Ever Do. And this is the first album I reacted to of Fiona Apple's on my channel. And I think that's honestly the hard part about it, in terms of like me getting to experience it, because I think it got kind of left. I listened to all these projects again before starting to rank them, and I realized I forgot most of Idler Wheel. Like, I just forgot it. And I think that was because, I was in the middle of a school semester. I hadn't really fully gotten into Fiona Apple yet, so it wasn't like, I had gotten used to it and gotten used to her quirks and her sound and how she makes it all work. So I didn't really have the ability to appreciate it all the way through. And I think that hurts it to some degree. But I also realized that to me, the Idler Wheel feels like a transition period, like after hearing her entire discography. Like before that, we have Extraordinary Machine, obviously, and we have like her diving into some more auxiliary and just like instruments that work as instruments, but they're not like as conventionally used in music. Like I think of Extraordinary Machine, like the title track, as a good example of that. And we start to see that more on Idler Wheel, but then we really get on Fetch the Bolt Cutters. So to me, Idler Wheel feels like it's not quite Extraordinary Machine, which I think has a distinct sound, and then it's not quite Fetch the Bolt Cutters, which also has a distinct sound. And I think for me, Idler Wheel just really feels like a transition period. And I think as a result of that, it doesn't have that own distinct sound, and so it doesn't stand out to me as much. There are some great songs on it. Left Alone, I always forget how good it is, and then I listen to it and I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I like Daredevil and Every Single Night. Like those type of songs, like there's actually a lot of good parts of the Idler Wheel that I really like enjoy, and I can definitely like sit through the album and just like enjoy it. I think one issue is that like I don't remember a lot what they sound like after they're done. Like they kind of all flow together, and that's like a cool experience. But I think the problem is that it makes it so I'm not going back for a specific song. It would mean I have to listen to the whole album all the way through, and I don't always have time for that. And I also think that all the songs, like they have different themes, and like I don't know if I would say like sonically it is definitely cohesive, so much so that I don't think of individual tracks. But like lyrically, it is discussing so many different things, and it kind of goes off in a lot of different directions in ways that I don't think always get tied up. And yeah, so I think I have like this sense of spiraling, and like it just spirals all over the place. I guess that's not really a spiral, more like a scribble. But yeah, I think that would be the best way to describe it. It's really like a musical scribble. And while that's like a good time sometimes, it means I don't necessarily go back to it as much as something that has a very, like, not necessarily linear, but like has a path that makes sense for the whole album to go in. I think this album also has a lot of longer songs on the project as well. And so as a result, it's again something where like, oh, I'm sitting through it. The better thing is that there is a lot more rhythm in it, and that is something I appreciate. And I think especially like when I listen to it more, now that I've like remembered that, yo, it exists, I think like it could move up, but I don't think I can safely say at this time that it will. At number 3, we have Extraordinary Machine. I really like a lot of songs from this project. And I think that's how I describe it better, is that while I could listen to the album in full, I do forget like how like 4 or 5 of the songs sound. Like the ballads one, most of that tail end is like a blur and I don't remember it. I know I really like Extraordinary Machine. The Temps, like I like the Get Him Back and Oh Sailor, not as highly, but like I do like them. Please Please Please, Better Than Fine, Better Version of Me. Like there are a lot of songs on here. Oh, Window, very much Window. Like there's a lot of songs on here that I really enjoy as like songs that I play, and I like the era there and like the feel of the album as a result of it, even if I don't necessarily listen to the album in full all the time. To me, this album really like signifies her shift to getting out of the industry, and I really like that. I think what I feel as great about it, if I like lived it real time and had Win the Pawn, and then 7 years later I get an Extraordinary Machine after like not really getting used to a Fiona Apple hiatus, would I feel rough about that? Probably. But I think I'm like cool with it, you know, as a listener and a new listener, where I can just like listen to all these albums like whenever I want. And for me, yeah, this album really signifies this like breaking through and allowing yourself to be yourself. And I think she just feels like she's having a good time on the album, if that makes sense. Like she's enjoying the album, but she's not trying to like I think she pushes herself, but she's not feeling pressured by like the industry. It feels like she's figuring out her own lane and allowing herself to be however she wants. That's how I feel about the album, and I think there's certain songs on this album that don't necessarily reflect that, but I don't think about those as much. And yeah, I don't know. I just like this project. I think it's just like fun. It's not always like the most fun in terms of its lyrical themes. It can get dark for sure. But I think it's a project that's more for not necessarily taking it too like seriously. If that makes sense. Like it's a more light production, and has she written better and done more complex instrumentations before that? Probably, honestly. But I think there's a lot of creativity in it, and I think it really sets up for Idler and Fetch, the bolt cutters, and I really appreciate that evolution, and I think that this album is necessary for that, but I think it's also just enjoyable on its own and does feel like a very distinct, album as the only one that happened during like the 2000s. I think it's like a cool sound, and it's not like anything else I heard in the 2000s. So, like, for that, I think I'm just grateful that we have like something that's more like chill and laid back. It does have like, some cool Fiona Apple vocals and lyrics and stuff like that. Like, it still has all that hard hitting stuff, but it does it in a way that's more rhythmic, not as hard as Win the Pawn, but definitely keeps your attention more than Tidal. At number 2, we have Win the Pawn. I'm not going to do the whole poem. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I'm a fake fan. I know. I listened to this album last November for the first time, so forgive me. And I also don't have my computer down here, so I'm not going to look at it and then like cheat and do that. So I'm gonna tell you it's Win the Pawn, hits, and it keeps going. But you know it if you do, and if you don't, you don't, and that's okay. This album, I forgot how good this album was, because like I listened to it in November, and I listened to it like over like December and January, and I enjoyed it, especially the first 3 tracks. The first 3 tracks, oh my god, that is probably one of the most perfect first 3 songs in a row that I've heard on an album. I think that's just like incredible that you can go from On the Bound, killer opener, holds my attention to the whole 5.5 minutes. That's how you do a long song. She discovered that. Like, she had so many long songs on Tidal, and then you do something like On the Bound, stuck in my head, perfect, sounds great, you're a piano masterpiece, like a virtuoso, whatever. Like, and then To Your Love, which is probably my favorite song on this album. I really love this song. I really want to cover it at some point. I need to get better at piano for it, but I really just want to do it. It sounds so fun, like, to sing. I mean, it's a little dark otherwise, but like, I really love all the lyrics in it. I think it describes a lot of Fiona's self-doubt and like, self-deprecation and all that. But then I love Limp, which is how we kind of switch it up, where this hard-hitting piano still stays there, but it's really taking that upset and frustration out on the person who deserves it. And yeah, that first 3 run is just so good. And if the album continued throughout that pattern, I probably would put it at number 1, but it's okay that it doesn't. I get that she switches it up. I really also like A Mistake. I feel like it fits a lot more with the first 3 tracks. I like that. I like Paper Bag. I know that's like the big favorite within the Win the Pawn. It's like not for me. It's like right in the middle. Like, I like it, but it's not going to be the top 3 songs, like the first 3 ones, or A Mistake. Yeah, Fast As You Can is also really good. Yeah, there's like good. I know I forget like the last half of the album to some extent, but like I like it. Like, when I hear it, it's not as catchy as the first part, but that's okay for me because I just really enjoy the atmosphere that we start in, and the rest of the album I just like. I just don't find it as memorable. But when the Pawn coming out, like, what, she's like 19, 20, 21, like roughly around, I guess, my age-ish, that's impressive. Like, that's so good. And I know that it kind of put her into a less mainstream direction, but I'm okay with that. I'm quite okay with that. Because it sounded really good. And I understand why there's like kind of a cult following for this album. I get it. I really do. I like this album. Yeah, I want to listen to it right now. So I think it's a really good project and one that Fiona Apple like should be very proud in particular for. And I understand, I guess, why some of the hate can come towards Extraordinary Machine for a lot of that piano and that type of sound getting abandoned to some degree. But I think that's okay. We can have a piano heavy album, then go into a non piano heavy album. It's okay. It's okay for her to try something different. And yeah, I do really like this project. I think it's just good. And it came out the year I was born, so I feel that way, and it's that sort of connection. It's just a really good project. I don't know. I keep saying that over and over, but like, are you gonna say otherwise? And at number one, I'm sure if you remember all 5 of the names of Fiona Apple albums, you would know by now. But my number one album is Fetch the Bolt Cutters. And when I say number one album, I don't mean really like number one Fiona Apple album. I mean pretty much this would be my album of the year for 2021 if this was released in 2021. It's not, and I discovered it too late. I know it was on my list last year, but like I didn't really discover how much I love this. Like when we go into Spotify Wrapped and all that other stuff on my channel later, you will see I love this album to pieces. It's so good. And the song I said was not my favorite, which was I Want You to Love Me, is probably now my favorite song on the album. I'm obsessed with it. It gets stuck in my head. I was a percussionist. I still do percussion to some degree, like on the music I make and stuff like that. And I still have an ear for percussion, but I don't play it as much as I did like in high school and stuff like that. But like, this is a percussive heavy album, and I don't think I knew that such an album could really exist. And I think one of the reasons why on the first listen and even on my re-listen did I not fully grasp that is that I didn't think that such an album could be made, if that makes sense. I think percussion is live is very hard to do if you don't have like a studio or some sort. And even like, I think a lot of studio musicians will say the drums are the hardest to get isolated drum sounds. And well, it's not just fully drums, it's all percussion here. Like, I don't think I knew that you could really take an album and make it mainly out of just like percussive elements. Like the fact that in some of the songs there's just no piano, no guitar, nothing that is actually making like different pitches other than Fiona's voice. That's so cool. And even when there is a pitch other than the first 2 songs, which have incredible piano, like you're still getting them very muted. Like I think there is some pitches and maybe drum set and stuff like that, but I'm not thinking of that when I think of it. I think of the drums that are in it, and it's just so good. This whole album is good. Like before I was saying, oh, what a few songs that I like on the album that like really stuck out to me. There are some that stick out to me, like I Want You to Love Me, Shamika. But then I think Fetch the Bolt Cutters is really good. Under the Table is really good. Relay is really good. Rack of His is really good. Newspaper. A Ladies. Heavy Balloon. Cosmonauts. For Her. Drum Set. On I Go. That's all the songs in the album. And as you could tell, I wasn't able to list all of them from all of the other albums. And I don't think I could easily do it on any other project. But this one, it has the most songs on it, and I'm able to do that. And I think it's just because I listened to this album. I've had times where I'm like, oh, I want to listen to a few songs from this album, and then I'm like, wait, but what about this song from it? And then I end up playing maybe the whole album, maybe half the album, but like I play it so much. I really just love this album. It's an album that anytime I've had like a lot of rage or like kind of frustration, like there was a time where I didn't get a job and the person who didn't hire me gave some really like rude, like unprofessional like commentary on why I shouldn't get the position, and it was like hurtful to read. And I just listened to that album and I felt better immediately. I was like, I got it out of my system. Or if I had a bad day at work, like I did that. If I was having a stressful time at school, I did that. Like I kept listening to this album and it's just so good. Like I don't understand how it can be so good, but it really is. I think when artists often take a long time to, do an album, I get that, hard work takes time and like diligent and really good quality music does take a lot of time. But to some degree, I've felt disappointed sometimes when people like take a long hiatus and their album that they return with is like, it's fine or just okay, and it's just like mediocre, and it's like, well, like I mean, it's still like just as good as anything else that's being released now. But I'm like, yes, but if someone releases a new album like every year, and then someone else releases it every 4 years, like there should be a quality difference in that. And I get that, I'm not saying that artists need to be doing their work all the time, but this album was 8 years in the making, pretty much. And I'm sure Fiona Apple didn't spend 8 years doing it for sure. But like this was 8 years after Either Wheel. And I would say that this is one of few albums that I'm like, this was worth and this deserved this amount of time to create it. And this is someone who's 22. If I was told that I could make an album that would make me feel the way I feel about Fetch the Bolt Cutters, and as long as I started at 14 and then it could get released when I'm 22, well, that would be a lot. But for me, I guess. But like if I knew how it would make me feel, incredible. Like I love this album also because I like how consistent it is within theme, even as it branches out into different stuff about like her childhood or assault or like her experiences just in general with men, or her experiences with other women and how they all relate to men, or just a changing of a song that she sang while she was in jail. Like lovely. Like I just love how all of it feels connected, and I feel like there's so much percussion and there's some shouting and some things. I think she just does so much, and I think there's times where like you can clearly hear the audible mistakes, and just every time I listen to this project I discover something new. And I know that a lot of like music commentators like will say that kind of thing, and I get that to some extent. But like this one, I discover something like new. And then I love everything I've heard before. And like I've also started going into like interviews about this project. And just the more I hear about it, the more I just eat it up. I eat it up so much. Like the fact that there's like so many mistakes on here, like sonically, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I mean, I think I do care, and that it makes it better. And it feels real and genuine. Like she feels so genuine on here. And I think because one, I think a lot of the topics do relate to me, as well as just the percussion just really hitting like where it wants to go in my head and really releasing serotonin and dopamine directly into my system. Like this album is just, I want to say perfect. I think Fiona Apple doesn't believe in perfect. I would say that she seems like the person who wouldn't believe in perfect. But this album is, to me, in all of its flaws and imperfections, like the perfect album I could have asked for. With that, we have finished this ranking, and I have to say, that was a lot. I know, I talked for so long. I hope it was an insane amount of time for y'all to endure. I hope I look at that camera and it's not like 50 minutes later. I do not know how much time has passed, but I know whenever I talk about Fetch the Bolt Cutters in particular, I'm just like, it just takes me away from time, and that's what music should do. And I feel like, yeah, I love listening to Fiona Apple. She's definitely one of my favorite artists I've gotten into in the past year, and I'm really appreciative of all of you who requested that I react and continue to react to her. I really have enjoyed doing so, and I really hope that it's not 9 years. I guess by mathematical, we would get our next Fiona Apple album in 2029. I hope before then. If you want me to react to any music videos, I haven't done any. I haven't reacted to a single one. I do not know any of her music videos. I know that the Criminal one's controversial, but I have not watched it at all. But I would be very interested in, continuing to see how Fiona Apple builds her worlds within her projects. And I know I'm going to be continuing listening to Fiona Apple in the future. It's not like I'm done. I really do actively enjoy listening to her projects and songs from those projects, especially Fetch the Bolt Cutters. But as I've said, I have plenty of songs from all projects that I do enjoy listening to. She's such a diverse artist, and I love her evolution and just love learning so much about her. She seems like a real person. And I think that celebrity really hasn't gotten to her, and I think that's what's really cool. I think, can she be out of touch in certain ways? Yes, of course. But I think some of that is intentionally being out of touch. She doesn't need to move in the direction that all the tides turn. She can go the way she wants to. She only moves to move. What did you think of my ranking? I know you don't agree with it. I couldn't find a single one that did on other videos of rankings and just on internet forums and all that. So please let me know down in the comments below what your favorite Fiona Apple album is. Rank all 5 of them. I would love to hear what you have to share. Any anecdotes, I love hearing those as well. I love reading those. I think they're just so interesting. And yeah, you can also give me some of your favorite songs if it will make you feel better if you put an album really low. I know Tidal, I always feel Tidal's not my favorite project, but there are some really good songs on there that I would hate if that album was removed, But yeah, I had a lot of fun ranking, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. If you like this video, please like it, comment down below, show me your reaction to listen to next. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already and you'd like to be. And thanks for watching. This is TurtleStormer. Catch you later.
It's storming turtles from out of the sky. Turtles don't need to know why. Smile big, oh big.